Hi everyone, Daljeet Peterson here from astrolab21.com. In this video, we're going to talk about Aquarius season 2021. Now, as it does every 4 years here in America, this Aquarius season will kick off with the inauguration of a new U.S. president. Now, this year's inauguration does seem to have a good deal of weightiness to it, both in terms of the political and cultural climate, as well as in terms of the really incredible astrology of the time. And in case you missed it, I recently posted an entire video on the astrology of the Biden inauguration. So you might want to check that out as well, and I'll post a link to it in the description below. But on January 20th, 2021, the sun will end its month-long journey through the sign of Capricorn and enter into 0 degrees of Aquarius. Now, this is a degree of the zodiac that has been getting a lot of attention lately, right? Because last month, on the day the sun entered Capricorn, the planets Jupiter and Saturn formed a grand conjunction at 0 degrees of Aquarius. And this was a event of major astrological importance, as I discussed at length in another previous video on the Great Conjunction, which I will also link to below. And it is significant that now here on the heels of that really momentous celestial event, we have Aquarius season 2021 initiated on the exact same degree. So now we do want to be cognizant of the fact that some of the energy that characterized the really challenging year of 2020 is still present in the current configuration. And while I think many of us are more than eager to put last year behind us, right, and resolve to make 2021 a better year than the last, we do have to acknowledge the reality of this current energy pattern and recognize that it can always be channeled in productive as well as destructive ways. Right? 'Cause this reflects the universal law of free will. So it is of paramount importance to emphasize the fact that ultimately the choice of how we utilize these energy patterns is up to us as individuals, right? Because when we make the effort to consciously utilize them, in that effort towards personal growth and our own evolution, well, that is an act of controlling our own destiny. But if we fail to recognize these deeper energy patterns and instead allow them to work on us unconsciously, then we can fall victim to groupthink and mob mentality and manipulation by all manner of invisible forces. And then we are essentially suffering at the hands of fate, right? Fate versus destiny. And the recent rather disturbing and almost embarrassing events that took place in our nation's capital are really a clear indication of the latter sort of coming into operation. Now, as I outlined in my 2021 forecast, this year ahead is going to be characterized by the tense square between Saturn and Uranus. I called it a clash of the titans, and it really is. It's a clash of wills between control, authority, and the past versus freedom, rebellion, and the future, right? And this aspect came into orb on New Year's Day. So we are already feeling its effects. And for the first few weeks of the year, Jupiter is still in its grand conjunction with Saturn, right? And so it's also involved in this square off with Uranus. And as Jupiter will do, it is just serving to magnify and intensify the effects of what is already a really potent configuration. Now, adding fuel to that fire on January 6th, we also had Mars at what's known as the anaretic or death degree of 29 Aries. And we had Mercury, the planet of communications, exactly conjunct Pluto, the planet of transformational power, in the sign of Capricorn, sign of political structure, right? So here we had a combination that at once symbolized both the Trump speech that was given at the White House and the activities that were taking place inside of Congress, where they were trying to recognize the voice of the people, Mercury, who were calling for a transition of power, Pluto, within our government, Capricorn, right? So it perfectly illustrates how both the light and the shadow of these archetypes can be invoked simultaneously. Right? We saw it right there on either end of Pennsylvania Avenue. And we can see how both the shadow and the light can coexist. And we can reflect the power and the clarity of these through conscious expression, or they can be expressed unconsciously, which shows up as danger and confusion, right? And then these energies were further muddled by the rather confusing and potentially delusional aspects of Neptune in Pisces, which is square to the nodes. And this is another one of those big configurations that I've been discussing a lot lately, and one that has particular bearing on, the current astrological weather. So adding this ingredient to this mix, we just had this recipe for inflammatory political speech, delusional violence, and social chaos. And those energies culminated in an angry, unconscious mob storming the Capitol building. Now, all of this is in no way an apology for the actions of those who incited and or participated in these really despicable events. But rather, it's just an astrological diagnosis of the energy patterns that existed and informed these events. And more importantly, to highlight the distinction between conscious versus unconscious expression of these powerful energies. Right? They can be used for good or for ill. And that is always up to us. And for me, it really highlights the deeper value of taking an astrological perspective as a means of helping make sense of the world. Right? It allows us to take a step back and observe these energy patterns that are being presented by these really potent planetary configurations, and use our own intelligence, right? Use our personal agency and decide how best to navigate through them. This requires a sense of detachment, a reasoned approach that is at once sort of multi-perspectival, right? Taking on many perspectives at once. That is socially aware, that is culturally awake, and that hopefully is imbued with a spirit of compassion. this essentially is the Aquarian way. These are the characteristics of Aquarius. And so these are the kinds of approaches and methodologies that we are being called to employ as we enter this Aquarius season 2021. And it's a big one. It's a heavy one. So it's important that we really pay attention. So as we now shift our focus away from the Capricorn energy that has dominated our lives for the last month and really for the last year, as we are crossing over from 2020 and into 2021, and we're now turning our attention to the sun's month-long journey through the sign of Aquarius. We do want to keep in mind those principles of conscious expression of our own free will and sort of remaining really vigilant against our tendency to fall prey to more unconscious behaviors, right? What I call the dark comfort of our shadows. Because the shadow can be comfortable in a lot of ways. And it's showing us something. It's trying to help us grow and work through something. It's why this is all coming up for us right now. And it seems like we're being tested. Like being tested by the universe at this time, right? And it's like it's the test at the threshold of the Aquarian age. And in a lot of ways, this Aquarius season 2021 is an opportunity to really initiate the most powerful shift of our entire lives. I mean, seriously, these are major life-changing times that we are moving through together. And what we are really witnessing, what we are experiencing, are the labor pains of the birthing of a new age. Okay, we look at it this way. We have been gestating in the watery womb of the Piscean age for over 2,000 years. And we've been almost cocooned in a sort of blissful ignorance where we would defer our personal authority to the dominant cultural forces of the age, which have been religion, the patriarchy, the hierarchy, the government. But now the contractions have started, right? And the womb is getting flooded with these noxious chemicals, which is a natural part of the biological process, right? But what was once a safe and comfortable womb now feels like an unbearably claustrophobic prison, right? We feel trapped. We feel like there's no exit, right? There's this sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And we feel like we are somehow victims of these circumstances that are spiraling way beyond our control. And, you know, for those of us who are still under the heavy and almost sedative-like influence of religion, for many of us, it may feel like Judgment Day, right? Like a time of reckoning and repentance. But the reality is this: we are about to leave the womb and enter into the birth canal, which is admittedly a terribly frightening proposition for most of us. So a resistance to that is really understandable, right? Like, Why would we want to leave the comfort of the womb, where we've had every need provided for us, where we have been literally tube-fed nutrient-rich foods, and we've been constantly bathed in warm, soothing waters, right? Why leave that? Why go down the birth canal? It's dark, it's tight as you know what, and it's claustrophobic, and the destination is unknown. There's no knowing what awaits us on the other side, right? From where we sit in this womb, we don't even know if there is another side. That's utterly terrifying. But into the birth canal we all must go, because the womb has now become too toxic, right? The chemicals are inducing in us an adrenaline state and preparing us for the journey, the exodus. The contractions are getting stronger and more frequent, and the process of transformation is underway. And there's no going back, because the only way out is through. Does that feel about right? Yeah, that's because this is what we are all going through together right now. And, each of us had our own different experience of that prenatal experience, if you will, of this age that we're now leaving behind, right? For some of us, we felt the warmth and unconditional love of mother, right? Metaphorically speaking. And then others may have felt her mental stress, or were damaged by her unhealthy habits or destructive behaviors. But regardless of that experience, we are all now entering the collective birth canal together. And some of us are going quietly, others going courageously, and still others are going kicking and screaming. But we're all going, hell or high water, right? Because this is what evolution looks like. This is evolution at work. And it is a terrifying transition. There's no two ways about it. But it's essential that we comprehend at what stage we are at in the overall birthing process, to know that this descent into the birth canal is not the end, but rather the beginning. And this is such a critical point, because when we look around, we seem to see that every sign is pointing to the end of the world. But we have to realize that's looking in the rearview mirror. It's clinging to the past. It's being afraid to let go. Right now, we need to look ahead. We need to move on. Because the old world has been slowly dying for decades. And the old ways just aren't working anymore. And so in a lot of ways, I think 2020 was the funeral and this period of mourning. But now a new world is in the process of being born. And it's time for us to wake up, to grow up, and to step up. And consider this. If we take this astrological perspective, we can see that the womb is Neptune, right? This oceanic bliss and connection to the oneness of the universe. And the contractions are Saturn. Difficulty, restriction, challenge, fear, right? And the descent into the birth canal is Pluto, right? Which is the transformational descent into the underworld. And then the birth itself into the light of the new day is Uranus. Deconditioning, liberation, freedom. So from this archetypal view, we can see why all of these powerful planetary energies have been so potently configured for us during this time. We are in the crucible of a civilization-wide transformation. So yeah, that's going to be a little messy. It's going to be painful. And it's going to be a little scary at times. But we have to trust the process. And we have to participate in that process. Because it's up to all of us to determine the health of the baby that we are collectively birthing. Because we are all that baby. So again, this is why we are currently being called to channel our highest Aquarian capacities, right? Things like rational detachment, collective sense-making, progressive activism, humanitarianism, idealism, fairness and equality. And as importantly, we want to remain increasingly vigilant against projecting the shadow side of the Aquarian archetype, which shows up as opinionated fanaticism, perverse fellowships, inflexible malcontent, and rather tactless eccentricities. Because let's face it, that stuff's going to show up too. And we're already seeing it, right? Percolating in certain segments of society where the sleeping shadow has been rather cynically stirred up and is now starting to operate within us in this unconscious, erratic, and potentially dangerous mob-like way. And listen, there's plenty of blame to go around, and we're seeing no lack of finger pointing going on right now. But in the end, we're all culpable, because that's just part of the deal of participating in a free and open society and being a part of a collective. You know, that's the social contract. That's the deal. So what's the antidote? You know, what is the best way to move forward? You know, how do we manage the very real fear, anxiety, and, you know, challenges of this birthing process? Well, to start, lots of slow, relaxed, deep breathing. No kidding. I mean, that is absolutely step one. Take a deep breath. And remember who you are. Remember why you're here. Remember love and kindness and laughter and friendship and generosity and respect. And think about everyone you know personally. Not your Facebook friends or some strangers you might follow on Instagram. Your real friends, your real family, your real peeps, right? People you know and love and respect and care about, who know and love and respect and care about you in return. And start there. And focus on the values and ideals and the dreams and the visions that you all share in common. And talk about them. Share, relate, connect, dialogue. Talk about what's going on with you. And work to deeply listen to the other, or the others. Really try and understand where they're at. And then maybe ask yourself this. How many of those people that we saw on the news storming the Capitol do we know personally? Right? And if your answer to that question is more than one, it might suggest you take a harder look at the company you're keeping. But for everyone else, just remind yourself that they represent a belligerent minority operating unconsciously that has gained really an undue notoriety by what are really just the machinations of our fear-mongering press. I mean, yes, it's real, but it's also not, right? Because it's gotten so overblown. It's so, in a lot of ways, out of proportion and just absolutely not what the majority of law-abiding American citizens think and feel. In a lot of ways, it's a bad meme of a country that has been duped by a fake reality TV president and a media system that only really knows how to profit from the ratings by broadcasting his displays of, idiocracy is what I might call it. In a lot of ways, what we're seeing is pure political theater. And it's using the old world tools of manipulation and control, right? But we're seeing it feels like a charade. It looks like a facade. And it's a wake-up call, right? Because that's not our reality. And then I'm always reminded of Plato's allegory of the cave, right? And then you can see it for what it is, right? It's just mere shadow play of puppet masters. And the more you pay attention to it, the more you feed into it with your energy and attention, the more powerful you make it. So one of the lessons we need to learn this Aquarius season is stop feeding the machine, right? We've all watched The Social Dilemma by now, haven't we? Right? And we've all learned about limbic hijacking. So please do yourself a favor. Turn it off. And instead maybe start to tune into what's real in your life. Make that your main mission for Aquarius season 2021. Because, in the age of Aquarius, that stuff matters a lot less, right? And the gig is really up on that stuff. It's become so transparent. It's so obviously hollow. We're seeing the emperor has no clothes. And the empire, as we've known it, is deteriorating. And now it's time for the real and the personal and the connected. Okay? That's where we're going to find our way through. So normally when I sit down to compose these forecasts, I usually highlight really specific planetary aspects and discuss all the elemental themes and the seasonal tones that we can look at in the month ahead. And, I'll continue to do that in subsequent videos. But, when I sat down to think about this month's forecast, really something much more powerful kind of came over me. And, it just seemed to me that this month is a month to think bigger, right? Steve Jobs bigger. Maybe even bigger than Steve Jobs bigger, in fact, right? So, maybe we need to really start moving beyond the mundane, beyond the day-to-day, the month-to-month, or even the year-to-year perspective. I've been asking myself this a lot lately, like, where do I want to be in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years? Where do we all want to be? What world do we want to be living in? Maybe this is a good month to set our intention for that world that we want to create together. And then let's start to make an action plan, right? Let's draw up our roadmap and let's start this journey together. Because, I found myself saying a lot over this past year that, these are once in a lifetime planetary configurations that we're experiencing. So maybe it's time for once in a lifetime responses, because there's just so much opportunity, right? The times are so ripe with so much potential, and there is so much light behind all of this darkness. So let's not be fooled, right? Let's not be deceived. And let's definitely not choose to follow those who seem to be blind. Let's turn away from that shadow play and have the courage to leave the comfort of this communal fire that we've all known so long and take a step back and walk out of the cave and turn and face the light, right? The light of the true, of the good, of the beautiful. So I think that's a good idea. Let's just give Plato the last word on this one and endeavor to follow his great advice. All right. Well, happy Aquarius season, everyone. Stay positive, stay focused, and stay safe. Satnam, everyone.